Well, Andrew, when I first arrived in here this evening, on a number of occasions and throughout the last 2 weeks building up to this, I've been asked for notes and or questions to be submitted to the THI people that I'm going to ask you. And I will say to everybody in this room, there's just no way in the world that I'm going to be asking questions in a prepared sense, because this is a conversation. But equally, this man on my right here doesn't actually need a question to be asked of him. I'm sure he could, on any one question, he could probably speak for the allocated 45 minutes. Because he is, apart from all the things that were read out in his biography, he is extraordinarily accomplished and confident about what he knows. He knows more things, which is why we got him here tonight. He knows more things than most of us put together. And he's experienced those things if you just listen to the sorts of things that he is involved in. I don't know how anybody could possibly have so much energy to be on all those committees you're on. But I want to ask you, there's something that I am intrigued about. The merger.
Yeah.
Dow Chemical with DuPont. Now, someone, somewhere, many years ago, conceived this idea. Now, in Australia, this would be an idea that everyone would say, it's not going to work, we've got to get regulatory approval, that's too hard. How did this get conceived?
So, Mark, as I talked to you to prepare for this the other night, as we chatted out there, I feel like I should interview you, because you're quite an accomplished guy in your own right. I'm very impressed with some of the things you've done, and I want to chat about some of those later. But on the topic of Dow and DuPont...
Gee whiz, that could mean anything. Which newspaper did you read?
I'm serving him notice. Okay. I've not spent any time with Mark, but I've enjoyed our conversations. He's quite a high-energy guy himself. And I got to tell you, I've got at least one witness in the room, my lovely wife, Paula, that she remembers well as I was potentially going to get the job I got in 2004, CEO of Dow. I was talking about how I could bring these two amazing American icons together. It was something I chatted about on our 4-mile walks. And I am obviously a creature of the industry I grew up in, chemicals and chemistry, and these are iconic names. But I got to tell you that the first idea of the merger was in 1928, and I wasn't around, obviously. But the then CEO, chairman of DuPont, sent a letter to the then CEO, chairman of Dow, who happened to be our founder, and said, "I'd like to buy you." And at that time, DuPont was something like 20 times the size of Dow, and the grandchild of the founder sent me that letter when I announced the deal, saying, how tables have turned. When I became chairman CEO of Dow, we were 3 times smaller than DuPont in terms of market cap. The idea to actually merge was a latter-day idea. What we were trying to do was figure a way to be prescient on what has become now very ubiquitous in American capitalism, and in fact, Western capitalism, which is short-termism. And the impatience of running a diversified entity, the evidence, the poster child for that is General Electric and what's going on with their meltdown and their breakup. And so what was very clear to me back then was Dow and DuPont were 2 big diversifieds that couldn't sustain themselves as diversifieds. Forget this impatient capital world which we're now in. The last 5-7 years has accelerated activism, and institutional owners have lost patience with anything longer than a couple of years. I never get asked questions by financial analysts, portfolio managers on what's your strategy for 2030 or 2025. They want to know, what have you done for me lately? So the pressure on getting the 2 companies together, I went through 2 CEOs who refused me. But I am high energy, but I am maybe incredibly persistent, is something else people could say about me. I thought, and I got the idea blessed by our board, obviously, when the first CEO, the CEO of then DuPont said no, I waited, and I got to the second CEO of DuPont. She said no. Then I waited, and then the third CEO got a phone call from me the day he was appointed, and we met 5 days later. We spent most of the next 9 weeks together. Paula remembers that period of time. And we put together the deal, just he and I. No lawyers, no nothing. By then, the pressure on the two companies was immense.
And what year is this?
This is 2015.
Right.
So 2004 to 2015, to get this concept together to the point where it is, and the numbers, and I'll stop the answer here. When we merged, I mentioned we were 3 times smaller from a market cap point of view in 2004. When we merged, we were equal market cap. We had caught and they had dropped. So $65 billion each, 130. The current market cap of the combined is 180. So we've delivered $50 billion of new value for the owners already. Soon, when we spin out the three, the combined market caps based on valuations we're quite comfortable with, and the synergies will be $220 billion. So we would have taken 130 and made it 220. And we've got a lot of happy owners out there, and create 3 amazing new corporations for the future, tooled for the future. One will be called Dow, one will be called DuPont, and the agricultural company has been given a wonderful Latin name, Corteva. It's really exciting to see that from what was going to be the debris of the chemical industry, in 1990, the top 20 chemical companies in the world, 2010, same table, only 5 companies survived. We were 2 of the 5. And we were not going to survive if we stayed alone. So a lot of more storyline. That's the subject of one of the books Fiona alluded to. I'll write about more detail later, but that's what happened with the merger.
It's all well for you to say, Andrew, that you're a persistent person. You're obviously a resilient person. Clearly, you've got lots of patience if you conceived this back then. But I know there has to be an outcome. What was the outcome in your mind? Because where were you guys ranked in sort of, so let's say chemicals, and let's say agriculture, top 6, Dow, DuPont?
Yeah, so but the merger was conceived when we were number 2 in the world, and they were number 5. They had dropped enough. Number 1 in the world remains BASF. The Europeans don't have the pressure of the Americans yet. They can run diversified models. BASF is soup to nuts. They have oil and gas, and they have agriculture, and they have downstream pharmaceuticals. They can't sustain themselves in a diversified, but the European owner is a lot more patient at this point in time.
And so, but I'm trying to work out like relevance, because you know, like all businesses today, everything's moving so fast. You've got to maintain relevance and relevance to your shareholders. And clearly, what you saw was an opportunity to become maintain relevance by actually getting bigger. The two getting together. How does that make you better though?
No, it's bigger and better. And so the uniqueness of this structure is to merge to split. Yep. There are trends going on that are tectonic in this world, and you're sitting on one of them, and I'll talk about it later if you wish. But these trends are tectonic, and one of them is short-termism. And I can digress for 2 seconds and say, you've got to learn the term inclusive capitalism. Western democracies and capitalism are not coexisting. The spoils are not being distributed fairly. The 1% are getting richer. We're leaving a lot of people behind. You don't feel the pressure in this country, but you have it. You've dumbed down your jobs. You think you're fully employed. You're not. You're losing jobs like no tomorrow. And, you know, not to say that these service industry jobs aren't great, but if you're putting kids through college to be burger flippers, you've lost the plot, okay? So this notion of inclusive capitalism even affects wealthy countries like this one. Inclusive capitalism is not socialism. It's actually this intersection between business, government, and civil society that I've operated on for my entire tenure. So that trend of short-termism is also hitting other trends, which is, what's my right to be publicly owned? Okay? A publicly owned anything has to have transparency of governance, transparency of performance. But if that transparency of performance is every 90 days, you can't invest the R&D for tomorrow's products and tomorrow's products lines. And you have to have transparency to why you're doing it in the first place. Now, that's not impossible, but it's more possible if I'm focused. So focus is the new word, and diversification is the right of the owner. The owner's saying, I'll invest in your business, your business, your business, and I don't want all those 3 in one place. And by the way, I'm not so sure you can run all 3 based on capability and competency. So moving to this notion of being 3 market verticals is what this demerger is going to do. It satisfies part of the conversation, but you were alluded to bigger before, and I don't want to lose that thought. So R&D and innovation. You all know that that is your right to have a future. That if you're not inventing and innovating, the difference between invention and innovation, again, I think you know a lot about this, Mark. Invention is a discovery, sometimes serendipitous, often serendipitous. And innovation is the business model that brings it to market. An innovative business model in the other disruption that's going on that I alluded to, the world is digitizing like no tomorrow, that smart scale is an opportunity in a market vertical if you can outpace the other competitor. It's the old analogy of a bear chasing 2 people to the tree, and one says to the other, you know, do you think we'll outpace the bear? To which that person says, no, I just have to outpace you. So this notion of competitive juices on innovation takes time. So smart scale in a vertical, I got more time from my owner. There's more patience, but you need the scale. You need to afford the R&D. I mean, most companies can be run for cash. Look, anyone can run a company for cash. It's very simple, but the death spiral begins. We can learn a lot from small and agile. In big becomes bureaucratic and calcified, and management systems basically go on the basis of good news takes the elevator, bad news takes the stairs. You have to flip that. And so leadership in a modern enterprise, public company owned, has to have the drumbeat of performance and the investment for the future. Dual horizons, if you like. An airplane pilot looks at the instruments when near-term volatility occurs, but always knows where he's going, where she's going. That dual horizons, up, down, is what the modern day public company CEO has to do. So what we've done is, out of that, given them scale in R&D in 3 market verticals.
So you future-proofed?
Nothing's future-proofed. In fact, never...
Through R&D, though?
Yeah.
Your ability to continue to innovate?
7,500 PhDs. 50% of the workforce 5 years or less with us. Average age taken down from 50 to 40. The average age of millennials, the percent of millennials in the company are up at 34% from 14% 10 years ago. I can go on and on and on. High throughput screening, going from 20,000 experiments a year to 2 million experiments a year. Under Armour needed a new shoe. I hope you're buying these shoes. They're the best ever. Light, high spring, all the runners are using them. They needed that new product from us in a thermoplastic plastic. They needed it in weeks. We gave it to them in days. From molecular engineering to producing. That type of agility.
We're talking about companies now which are truly global. And of course, we don't experience this type of thing in Australia, except at the mining level. Everybody else we do, Australians tend, I don't know, we tend not to venture out that far. We tend not to be as adventurous as Americans. What is this mentality of Americans that allows these things to happen, and over such a long period of time?
Yeah, look, I'm a great student of that, and I remember many years ago when I joined Dow and early in my career, someone gave me an article about the difference between Australians and Americans, and it stuck with me. When 2 countries are similar, you're expected to be the same. You're not. We're not. And what Americans have that Australians don't is ingrained to them in their school system, which has really worked wonders for them, and that is they are very big on presentation and form as much as substance. I know, at least the Australia I grew up in education-wise, was very big on substance, learned by rote. One of the reasons America has generated a whole class of entrepreneurs, America is an entrepreneurial country. It's not just its freedom model, we have that here. But back to the merger, what I realized in 2004 is, with my board, is if we didn't risk the entire company, we would die. Risking something small, okay, you lose small. Risking something big is a risk appetite that Australia doesn't have, that Americans do. In fact, the rite of passage in America is almost as if you've had several failures along the way. You prove yourself by the things you've tried and failed, hopefully at small scale. I mean, it would be terrible if what I did failed, but there's a lot at my level and with the deal we did. But along the way, I learned how to have risk appetite in every job I had. And when I was given that empowerment at every job I had, I actually could paint the canvas of the job I had. And the content just earned me the right to get the job. The performance was based on how I did the job. And that is the America I've grown to love and admire. And you know, they've maintained it very well at their university system. So it's not just at, you know, very early ages. You get it all the way. Now, Silicon Valley is your poster child, right? And so you got that whole Stanford ecosystem. But it's every part of America that does this.
And of course, you now have a president who's grown out of that sort of environment.
Wondering when you'd get to that.
So, well, let's talk global and let's talk your president. Now, I have had some experience with your president because he actually owned the TV show along with another fellow that I was involved in. And I had some experience with him. And it was a good experience where I actually interviewed him on television for 30 minutes in 2014, I think it was. Of course, he wasn't even going through nominations, I don't think, at that period. But the two things that I got from him, and I'd like you to give us some commentary because I know you know him and I know you're close to him. The two things I got from him, and I have to tell you, was he's not that generous in what he gave me. But the first thing I got from him was he is incredibly conscious of who he is, what his message is, what he represents, and not at any stage did he drop his guard. In the 30 minutes that he spoke to me, the 30 minutes I spoke to him before he spoke to me on camera, and the 30 minutes I spoke to him off camera, an hour and a half, at not one point. The second thing that I got from him, which makes him a very powerful individual, in my view, he's driven, but driven in a specific way, doesn't give up, doesn't stop. The second thing I got from him was he was extraordinarily critical of Australia selling its resources to the Chinese. But I don't interpret that. Now, my first reaction was, hang on, Mr. Trump, because he insisted I called him Mr. Trump, but I did slip a few in Donald's, just to be cheeky like all Australians. But my first response, Andrew, in my mind was, hang on, they're our biggest trading partner. 70% of our exports go to China, Korea, Japan. But then I started thinking about it. It wasn't coming from that place. He was trying to be telling me that we should be protective of what we own and don't give it away. How much of that has he taken into the American presidency and used his office to protect America? I.e., the best example is the most recent tariff announcement.
Well, I think you characterised him very well, and clearly your experience with him as you interviewed him, I think is playing out on the world stage. The mistakes that are being made in characterising him by the media and many people who are distant from him is that he's playing out a role called President of the United States. He's not playing out that role as it's been done in all of America's history. There is no other person who's appeared. They tried to find one, and I think they did find one way back at the beginning of America that had a business mindset only. This is a gentleman who's driven by business only, and it's his style of business, and as I was saying to Mark at the table, it's relationship-centric. I think you asked me about the Xi-Trump connection, and he rewards loyalty, and he basically fires disloyalty. And the definition of relationship and business relationships to him is what drives him. And clearly he put a value proposition in. Growth in the United States is climbing fast. I was at a meeting with him, a few weeks ago, where he was actually saying, I want a number with a 4 in front of it for GDP growth in the United States this year. He may well get it. Then he wants 5 next year and 6 the following year. How many times has the US economy grown at 6% since the war years, since World War II? Okay, 1 year, okay, in the Clinton presidency. If we get 6% GDP growth, it'll totally pay for the tax reforms. Now, I don't know whether we're going to get 6%. I can only look at my product lines. We doubled the size of our footprint in the southern part of the US, Texas and Louisiana, and we made that decision a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. We've started up the facilities, and they're all sold out. I thought I'd be exporting some. I'm not exporting any. I'm all selling them in the US. So we just approved another $6 billion to actually double the footprint again. Demand is off the charts. And so there is responsiveness going on in the economy, and some of the big issues that he's working on, okay, are very driven from him, to your point. And I would tell you, central to he wakes up every day and doesn't sleep all that much, by the way. He wakes up every day thinking about the worker that voted him in the office. But having said that, that isn't the real act. This is the part that sort of gets me a bit upset. I mean, I'm not upset. Having all this great stuff happening in America right now, and I haven't even talked about workforce of the future and digitization, which I'm heading the task force on that with Secretary Acosta, who's the Department of Labor. It's fascinating to see the things that he's put in motion that were never ever done before. He's doing, enough talk. I mean, if you ask me back to my career, what distinguished me in this great American company is my say-do ratio had no gap. If I said it, I would do it.
What do we do today as parents with our kids, given what's going on globally, in order to keep them relevant in education and with where digitisation, globalisation, e-commerce and every other thing, Internet of Things, all the stuff that's flowing through?
Yeah, now I'm looking at your audience and I think they're still engaged because I can really go on about this topic, so stop me because I happen to believe it's the central, quintessential question of our times.
Absolutely.
And I honestly, I am passionate about what's going on already in some key economies like the United States, France. I am a big fan of what Macron's doing on this topic. Germany, who actually was right at the base of it, but other countries and clearly China. So let's talk about what it really means. It really means that you have to retool the entire education system. Use the same point you made, but I'll use US statistics. The 4-year liberal arts degree in the United States, people who take that degree, 40% of them don't finish, and of the 60% that do finish, 40% can't find a job. Yet, America, as I sit here today, has 500,000 jobs open of the digital kind. Now, with immigration restrictions, which are occurring as part of America First, we have to retool the supply chain. The McKinsey study says by 2025, 500 million jobs will be eliminated by technology around the world. Eliminated. I heard the ANZ stats earlier. And that is only going to increase. We're on the S-curve of humans being replaced by machines. And here's the good news of that we still need to manage the interface with the machines. So AI is not machine or human. AI is machine and human, except we have to change the human. The human can't be taught the way we're teaching the humans. We need liberal arts degrees, sorry for anyone who's doing one of those, the equivalent in Australia. We do need art and history and philosophy and all those wonderful things that bring us culture. But if we don't fix this digitization point, we actually are going to not have the workforce to keep up with the Chinas who are totally on top of this, as well as the Indias and others who are building this. America and this task force I'm on, basically we're going to change, the recommendation of the president is to change the entire curricula of the equivalent of primary school and high school to literally not just introduce coding, but actually introduce vocational training, rebuild vocational training, which has fallen apart in the United States. Rebuild it not just to produce electricians and millwrights and plumbers and pipe and fitters and all that, but also to bring digital operations technicians to the workforce. That the concept is earn as you learn as you earn. And to start to break up the 4-year degree. Every parent in America still says, I want my child to go to college and do a 4-year degree. That's wrong. In fact, we're not hiring those people, okay? We don't want that 4-year degree. So earn as you learn means you start interfering with when you get educated. In fact, if you aren't embracing continuous learning in the digital world, I'll use one stat. The half-life of all human knowledge, as we sit here today, is the year 1983. In 2025, the half-life of all human knowledge will be the year 2020. That is, in essence, means in 5 years, humanity will learn as much as it did in its entire prior history. How can you keep up with that? So what you've got to do is learn how to interface with these intelligent machines. And it's every profession. And I don't think that urgency has arrived in a place like Australia yet.
It definitely hasn't.
And I think it has to be top down. And I think the country needs a digital strategy like no tomorrow. And this nonsense of cutting R&D budget has to stop. And also to get our universities and our high schools tooling themselves so that not every high school and not every university produces the same. We need to differentiate. We need to say, this university, you focus on that. This university, you focus on this. You need to do all of that. That's one of the recommendations that will come out.
And that's where the inertia is, though. In Australia, at least, it's at the university level. It's at the tertiary level. Come out of university with theoretical understanding, and that's it. They do not work as they go. And they waste a lot of time. And in this country, they end up coming out owing a lot of money, which is even worse. My view on this is that the government, if they are going to give you a HEX loan, that they should actually say to you, if you can't get a job with that degree from that university within 2 years after you demonstrate you tried, that you don't have to pay the HEX loan.
Yeah, so the concept of earn as you learn is sort of that, and it's a bit of a bonding thing. So I need a certain supply side. I will bond students so that they do their 2-year internship while they're away from learning, they're learning with me. So right now in America, what's happening is because government hasn't been doing it, private companies are doing it.
Right.
So I have training facilities. I have taken over curricula of local colleges. I've got my retirees working in there. They love to do it. Retirees love to go back and teach. And then I've brought in the millennials to help me do it as well as part of, I have a program where you can take a year off and then actually be a teacher in one of these colleges. We've become schools. That's how we've overcome this deficit point you're making.
Yeah, this guy's got amazing energy. Everybody in this room knows I admire his energy, but what I want to know is, where do you get the energy from?
Mutant gene? I don't know. So
But
I
how
don't
do you
know.
do it? What
Well,
drives you?
I don't know. I've been asked that question. I was answering you out there. Maybe you're born this way. I don't know. Have you guys ever seen the book? I forget the name of the writer now. I was trying to look it up earlier. Have you ever heard of the term mood elevator? Anyone heard that term? Google it. It's a book. I've used this on my family. So the mood elevator is, I'm just a naturally positive person, and I've lived my life on the numerator, not the denominator. That's very mathematical.
Yep.
Okay, so if you're an optimist and live your life on the numerator, there's no problem that you can't overcome. If you have the energy and you have the passion to help others, which I do, then you live your life on the better part of the mood elevator. And as you do things, you climb up it. And one of the early things in the mood elevator, in the positive side, is being a curious learner. And I mentioned outside to you when we were talking about this, it's not just energy, you need to have a passion. And I was very fortunate. I ended up studying something that I was passionate about, joined an amazing company that gave me these amazing opportunities. I never for a second took it for granted. As Paula will tell you, she came with me the entire journey. Every job I got, I fretted that I wouldn't be very good at the job. And so I studied and I learned and I said, I'm going to be the very best at doing that. 5 years of working for one bad boss, I could have been very negative about that. I went the other way. I said, I'm going to learn how bad a boss this person is, so I'm never a bad boss. I'm going to learn all the things that person's doing so that I'll never do them. And I'll find ways to be effective at doing that. So that's passion, because you're enjoying what you do, and that's what I think drives me, passion and energy. If you have energy and you're doing something you don't like to do, it's going to be a train wreck. And I've tried very hard to stay in my sweet spot. Now, the thing that I got along the way that Dow gave me was bandwidth. I've mentioned this S-curve of the digital world. I happen to believe we're all arriving at these intersections in this modern world of ours. We haven't talked about sustainability and the 10 billion people that'll be on this planet in 2050. I'm very passionate about doing something about that. And the SDG 27 goals from the United Nations, I was on the team that developed those. How we actually put societal good and health and managing ourselves on this fragile planet of ours is as critical as anything else we're doing. I'm a member of Richard Branson's B team, and there's a member of the Australian B team here. The B team is literally named as Plan B. Plan A ain't working, to quote an American. So what's Plan B? What are we going to do about the billion people without access to clean water? What are we going to do about the 2 billion people that don't have access to safe food supply? What are we going to do about these massive natural events that are occurring based on climate change issues? And why are we not caring equally about the people who are below the 1%? Why aren't we showing empathy and care? So I'm passionate about that. So I have a lot of passions, I have a lot of energy, and then along the way, this mood elevator, you get to get experience that gives you creativity, which you have in spades, wisdom, and the ultimate place you reach in the mood elevator is the one that I happen to think I've arrived at, which is being grateful. So part of founding the Hellenic Initiative, I'm grateful for the people who got me here. I'm grateful for my forebearers who had the courage to immigrate from that little island of Castellorizon and take that decision to find their way to Darwin, of all places. I'm grateful for what they did in Darwin to live in that climate. And they had, wasn't exactly, a high-grade place. Sweat, to really put us, to give us the opportunity to go to university. I'm grateful for Australia, because Australia is just this amazing country that, has had the benefit of resources for so long. For God's sakes, let's try and diversify a little away from a farm, hotel, and a quarry, okay, which is, I think, the brains of this room could do it. And I'm grateful at the end of the day for having the opportunity at Dow, because instead of being a leader, I became a follower. I think if you reach the top of the mood elevator, you realize that actually your lasting impact is everyone else. So at Dow, I've tried to lead from following our organization, not being the one at the front. And I think that humility, is what you get at the top of the mood elevator. At the other end of the mood elevator, if you're interested, if you've Googled it by now, you'll find depressed, anxious, stressed. And that's what we're doing to a lot of people. We're doing that to people. And politicians like Donald Trump are getting elected because people are angry, which is also on the bottom of the mood elevator.
And you just talked about your parents, and you talked about your young life in Darwin. Were your parents, if you looked at the mood elevator, where did they sit?
Well, I lost my father young, so it was hard to know. It was a very troubled existence, and my cousin's in the room somewhere, and he and I grew up kind of together, and we had a wonderful coexistence as the two eldest sons, both named Andrew, of course, for the non-Greeks in the room. Talk to a Greek to explain why that happens. Not everyone's called Nick.
Or George.
Or George. But yeah, it was hard to know. With my mother, though, she was always a happy person. I think that really helped me a lot. And being the first son and only son, Greek mother, I got to tell you, my sister's in the room, she will tell you that if I wasn't God, I was pretty close. So I got a lot of confidence early that I could pretty much do anything. So yeah, I'm grateful.
And how much in your life, Andrew, how much in your life, because we always talk about Hellenism, and Hellenism is an important point, but an important word, but it has lots of meanings. Would you explain to me, how would you explain to the audience, what does it mean to you, Hellenism?
Well, that gives me an opportunity to thank everyone for being here tonight, certainly those of Greek descent, but those who are not of Greek descent, to ANZ, Mark, and sponsoring this. Look, I had to think about that and why THI even formed only a couple of times in my growing up. I never thought of it. I always, being in Darwin, it's so multicultural. Being Greek wasn't all that different to being, Italian or Yugoslav or whatever, or being, Aboriginal or anything. We were all mixed. First non-Anglo-Saxon mayor was in Darwin, an Asian, Chinese. Chinese got there very early in Darwin. So I grew up in this notion that, multiculturalism. I never thought about the Greek thing at all. other than, of course, what I said about my mother and my parents. But along the way, what happened to me was, my cousin's responsible for this actually. I started going back to the home island of Castlereagh. We built a home there. And I noticed that, in the lives of the people there, they hadn't progressed much in 40 or 50 years. That when we came in as diaspora, we had a good time, we did our summer thing, we dropped money in the island, some of us tried to help. And then you notice that to help them was impossible because everyone was corrupt. And, to get things done regularly was impossible. So you notice the failure of the state. So the experience I had, and many people like me, American Greeks in particular had this experience, is when you put money there, you'd lose your money because you couldn't trust anyone. That was their experience. So I understood all that, and then the crisis hit. And the event that caused THR to be formed by George Stamets and I was asked to speak at a Leadership 100 event, which is Leadership 100 is an organization in the United States that brings together a group like this on a regular basis, mostly American Greeks. And I was asked to speak about my Dow journey. Prior to getting in there, I was being interviewed by a bunch of Greek reporters about, what are the American Greeks doing here? What's the whole thing? And I said, well, we're talking about, my company and why are they honoring me? And I was interviewed by this young reporter who said, well, why aren't you doing anything to help Greece? And I said, well, Greece doesn't want to be helped. And she said, well, I'm a young person in Greece and we don't know what to do. We're lost. And it kind of struck me. And so Paula remembers this. I go into the room, I had this speech, and just on the spur of the moment, as I'm prone to do, as my Dow people will know in my life of Dow speeches, I threw out the speech and just spoke from my heart. And what I said was, I'm ashamed of all of us. I'm ashamed that we're here as beneficiaries of this great country, the United States of America, and we're doing nothing to help Greece. I'm ashamed that we're standing here celebrating in this wonderful hotel in Miami and nothing about what we're talking about has to do with the homeland. And I know the homeland maybe wasn't good to us, but that's no excuse to not help the next generation of young Greeks. It touched me that the discussion I had then, I gave a much longer speech than that, but then and then following that, by George Stamets and a bunch of others, was what we really had to do was change the institutions of Greece. And that the aggregation of what has happened in Greece in the last 50, 60 years was the failure of the state and creating a state mechanism that wasn't functional, that really wasn't helping the people have a future. And if you look at other countries, and Israel's my poster child, I mean, Israel and Greece have roughly the same number of people in the countries, 11 million each, and roughly the same number of diaspora. 6 million in one, 6 million of the other. We're about the same size. Their 6 million do so much for Israel's cause. But Greeks around the world were given resiliency by their forebears based on the traditions of Hellenism. And I'm not just talking about the ancients, which are a long ago memory, but 2,500 years of a culture, family-based, values-based. Why are we letting that go asunder with the young people of Greece? So my Hellenism reawoke with this notion that it's my duty to do something. I am so amazed at the response. Here in Australia, Nick and all the other board members, thank you. The American Greeks now see you as, they were a little worried about a reverse takeover. So seeing I've done a merger or two, I think I could advise them. But you guys are just great. Thank you for the videos we've seen, the comments being made. The American Greeks have gotten together for the first time ever to help Greece. The Australian Greeks have done that. I'm at an event in Montreal in a few weeks. The Canadian Greeks have had an event in Toronto, now in Montreal. They are forming a pan-Canada THI, and the same with the UK. If you get those 4 countries and get the other ones as well, our 6 million diaspora, we can rebuild Greece from the ground up. we are going to create a mechanism that brings the professionalism and the brains of the diaspora, and not to disappoint it by crawl, walk, run. We'll do it over time. And this, thank you. And I should be clapping all of you, because the buy-in to that thought is what's bound us together. And we can't let that dilute. And I'm committed, from the seat I've had on this thing, to stay there. Heaven knows, as someone else, I think the owner or someone said, I don't have the time. I haven't had the time for this. I soon will have a little more time, but I will tell you, I'm not going to give up on this rebuilding Greece from the ground up thought.
And I think what's interesting about what Andrew's saying, and I've listened to lots of people speak, like Musk, etc., and the sort of conversation Andrew has is about big notions, big notions about saving the world, literally, about making sure that students are better educated, by saving America, and now saving Greece. And it seems to be a hallmark of super successful people. That allows you, in my observation, allows you to maintain your energy. If you're looking at that purpose, that why, helps you deal with the how on the way through.
True.
How is always hard to work out. Sometimes it takes years to work out, how am I going to get this merger done? But I know why. If I keep looking at why, I'll get there. So for all of us, there's a lesson in that. The big why will give us the patience to do the sorts of things that Andrew is aspiring to and is actually achieving. I really appreciate this time with you, Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's going to be the end of this session.
Thank you.
And I'm going to call on Nick Pappas now to say a vote of thanks.